Hello, I'm Dave Herman, and this is a conversation with George Harrison. We met with George at his Los Angeles home on a sunny California weekend. We found him cheerful, pleasant, warm, and friendly, and in a sense, eager to talk. We began our conversation by asking him about his early years as a child in Liverpool, and about the people who influenced him personally and musically.
It's pretty vague thinking of musical things. I mean, I can remember names like Bonacolino and things like that. Bonacolino, I don't know. I mean, just remember hearing things. I remember being young and I'd sing at parties. You know, if my mother took me to a party, I'd end up singing. I don't know if that was, you know, even then I was full of ego, or if I just liked being the laughing stock of the party. But whatever it was, there was always something going on there. But, you know, it was, Liverpool was, you know, I was born just at the end of the war, and it's hard for Americans to imagine, but anybody, say, in England or Europe can know it easily. It's like you can still go in Liverpool today and you'll find like a row of houses and then just one area that's just leveled, you know, where they had a direct hit from a bomb. So I grew up in that atmosphere of, you know, just broken down houses, and, you know, there's a lot of just feeling left over from the war. It was pretty stark. The north of England was, you know, it was nothing much going on there until, for me, until, say, around the time I was 13, which was the first thing I got into was, there was this guy, I keep talking about this guy called Slim Whitman, who was an American.
Didn't he do a record whispering, or he did play those slide guitar things?
Well, he was like a country singer, but nobody seems to have heard of him, or very few people in the States. But he was big in England. He used to top the bill on the big theatre circuits.
And he did like whispering.
Oh, Rosemary, I love you. And he did Indian Love Call. Anyway, so he was just a guy playing the guitar. I remember that was the first time I felt like playing the guitar. But then what happened in England was they had what they called trad jazz, traditional jazz, which was really just like the English version of Dixieland and that type of thing. But there was something that came out of that. Like in England, there was a band called Chris Barber Jazz Band. They had like upright bass and, you know, banjo and, you know, clarinets, that type of thing. So out of this band came the banjo player, Lonnie Donegan, and he was into, it was really bluegrass and what is like Hank Williams or country blues type of thing. And so he started this thing which was, they call skiffle, because, you know, Lonnie Donegan had a #1 hit in America with Rock Island Line. So he started a thing which enabled all the kids, really, they could just buy a guitar for, you know, $30 less. My first guitar cost £3.10, which is now $15. And with a guitar, acoustic guitar, and then a bass made out of a tea chest with a broom pole and a piece of string and a washboard, you know, a washboard with cymbals. Sure. And so they had this whole skiffle thing. So the skiffle craze came, and lots of people got guitars, went into that. Then that died out, but the ones who hung on, then came the rock and roll thing with, you know, Buddy Holly and Little Richard and all that. So I suppose the 60s rock groups, particularly in England anyway, were the ones who'd initially started out, say, in the late 50s skiffle craze. But then we all got a bit, you know, the ones who stuck with it got guitars, electric guitars and drums, got rid of the washboard and the tea-chest bass, got proper drums and electric bass.
You've always kind of exhibited kind of a very fine wit, a sarcasm, if you will. Does that also go back to childhood? Were you kind of the class-wise guy with teachers and things? I think I recall reading somewhere where you had made a deal with some teachers when you were in school.
I don't think I was funny then. I didn't like school, you know. This is, say, the grammar school, the high school period up until 17, you know, from, say, being 12, 13 to 17. I never liked that because it was very, I mean, it's so different to, like, the American school thing. I went to a school with, where Paul McCartney went. It was an old Victorian building, and it was all that old English sort of attitude. It was cold and, you know, very serious, and for the first time, you know, going in that school, it was very serious. You know, you had to do your maths and algebra and Latin and German, and, you know, you had to do all these things, and it was no fun anymore, you know. I just used to sit at the back drawing pictures of guitars. I was not there, really, you know. But I wasn't particularly funny at that period. But there is a thing from Liverpool, they say, you know, a lot of the people in Liverpool or the north of England are quite funny. But then you have to be in order to live there, you know, because it's... I remember once saying to Billy Preston, have you ever been to Liverpool? He says, hey man, there's 10 Liverpools in every state. You know, it's like that. You know, Liverpool is not, it's a good place to come from, like they say, but not to actually be, particularly.
Okay, well, you said that Lonnie Donegan and the skiffle music started and you were already into your teens, and there's no sense going over the whole story about how the Beatles came together. I'm not going to ask you all about that. But what I would like to find out from you is how you were feeling as a person, as a man, when you first started to realize that something very big was happening, that it wasn't... In other words, let me ask you this first. What was your idea of what it would be to be successful when the Beatles were first getting started? What were you hoping for yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I remember before before the Beatles got going, this is when we were just still at school, I used to have flashes, like, you know, going to sleep at night, I'd just have flashes of speedboats and motor cars and all things which you get when you're famous and rich. And when we formed the band and we started just being semi-professional, there was something about us which, you know, could be ego or cockiness or whatever, but I think we were too naive to even realize anything like that. At that time, there was something in us, and I don't know what it is, karma, I call it karma. It's something, again, to do with what you were before, that we always felt as though we were going to be successful.
But what you were feeling then?
So really, it was just a matter then of pursuing that and just keeping on playing. So we were just enjoying, really, that's all. We enjoyed just working as a band because there was nothing else we wanted to do. We really got off on that, and we were very happy when we could make, you know, £5 a week each, and then when we started making £40 a week each, you know, we were ecstatic, and then we were on our way. We just wanted to make a record because we were still cocky enough to feel that all we needed was to make a record and we'd be okay. I mean, it was like blind faith.
But was there ever a point where you felt that the success was just seemed to almost be getting out of control, where it was difficult to deal with?
Yeah, that was that period. I mean, it was then when it got out of control that was, I suppose, contributed to us going into sort of semi-retirement, because it just became too difficult. And one of the things was that the whole Beatlemania in the 60s, I think, even though at first we all got off on it, I think the world, or the pop or music world, got off on it either more than we did or as much as we did, but then they carried it too far, you know, where it was cute for the policeman to have bullets in his ears and have pictures of everybody screaming, and for, you know, the Pope to wear a Beatle wig, and it got to the point where the Beatles, you know, the Beatles became like an excuse for everybody to freak out. You know, they'd say, oh, well, the Beatles are in town, it's Beatlemania, so everybody go around smashing shop windows and turning motor cars over because it was Beatlemania.
Well, how did these kind of things make you feel?
Well, they made us feel like isolated, because first of all, we never saw much of what was going on. We were always trapped in a room, and it was fun at first thinking of how much attention was being given us, but it got very boring, it got tiring, because we just became the recipients of all that madness, you know.
Now that it's 7 or 8 years later, I guess you've had time to reflect on all of that. And do you have any explanation of what that phenomenon really was? I mean, people have called the Beatle phenomenon the biggest cultural change of the century, and that it had an influence on the world that goes far beyond music and entertainment. I mean, now you've had so long to reflect on that. What do you think it actually was that caused all of that? I mean, it was just music.
I've no idea. You know, the only thing I can think of is, and even then I, really would prefer these days to avoid this type of dialogue, but it's the whole idea of, say, how come Tchaikovsky, when he's 3, can play the piano better than Liberace can when he's 50? You know, how come one kid at 8 can do mathematics better than IBM computer? You know, there's people like that. We're all what we are now is really the effect of whatever we've been in the past. And you know, I do, through this Hinduism, believe in reincarnation and all that. So what I believe, basically, simply, is we all live from birth to death. We all create a lot of action, which is action-reaction they call karma. And it's like that. It's like credit and debit. You know, it's just like an account that at death, death is actually your physical body packs in, that we keep going, and at some period later we take another body and we try again. But at that point of birth, even if somebody born today is not just something totally new, you know, because all those scriptures tell us anyway that there's never a time when we weren't, and there won't ever be a time when we're not. You know, it does get heavy philosophical, but that's what the Lord teaches in every scripture, you know, that it's only the physical body is the thing which goes through the changes and which is impermanent. So actually, everyone that's alive is in some way born into a position or a situation or a country or a time which is the direct result of the previous actions and the reactions.
Do you feel at all that you've ever been in touch with any of your past lives, any way through clairvoyance or deja vu experiences? Do you have any idea of where you might have been and at what time you might have been before?
No idea at all. But I do feel something. It's like learning with knowledge. Sometimes you don't have to have certain experiences to learn something. Sometimes something triggers something else off, and you somehow intuitively you just know something. I don't know. I believe that's because of whatever happened in the past. I've got no idea of, I wouldn't go that far to say, I was this in my past life or anything. I don't even know if in a past life, if it was, 2 hours before, if I died 2 hours before I got born this life, or if it was 1,000 years before. I've got no idea, but I do believe in karma and rebirth, which, go hand in hand. That whole thing of action, reaction, life, and death, they're just the same, really. Life and death are the same. Somebody said, what's the cause of death is birth. Everybody's worrying about dying, but in order not to die, you just don't have to get born, because the moment you're born, you're automatically going to die, because birth and death go hand in hand. So does action, reaction, karma, and rebirth. So I just believe this is getting pretty far out to say how come the Beatles did that. I don't know. All I can put it down to is that whatever it was, the chemistry of four people being born in that period, based upon whatever we'd been in our past, in that place, that time, with everybody else, it's relative. I believe, it's like you meet people in your life. I think a lot of your friends are people who were your friends in other lives. And I think people who, if you hate somebody, I'm sure you're going to keep coming through life after life hating. It'll be the same people, because...
You learn to love him.
Sure. So I don't know. It's magic. It's like, it's only the same as, how Tchaikovsky can play the piano and how this kid is smart at doing that. It's all down to karma somehow.
Anyway, it would be safe to assume from what you're saying that you feel good about yourself. And
I know. It's the art of dying.
Okay.
From all things must pass.
The art of
There'll come
dying.
a time when all of us must leave here. And, there'll come a time when most of us return here.
Well, maybe we can leave the subject of the Beatles by saying that you obviously feel good about what that contribution was, what your contribution was as one of the Beatles to whatever that was.
I think, generally speaking, it was a good, positive, that's it, really. All we did was pick up on the music of, all the people, Chuck Berry's and Buddy Holly's and all those, with whatever influences we'd received by being born in that situation in Liverpool, and somehow translated it with our own personalities, or the individuality of the four of us, translated it into, without knowing actually, into something which a wider variety of people could communicate with or could relate to.
Do you consider yourself a Hindu? Do you label yourself as a Hindu?
Well, if, on a simple level of talking about religions and Buddhists and this and that and the other, I mean, there was a period like 60s when everybody freaked out on acid and everything, and everybody started getting into this and that and the other. And I read a bunch of different things, but I was very attracted to Hinduism. But then one of the things that Hinduism teaches is that all religions there's a truth which underlies all religions. So, I'm a Hindu, actually, at heart. I'm a Hindu, but all that means is that I can relate more to, like, the teachings in the Gita than I can in the Bible. But that's no put down the Bible. It's just that from a Christian point of view, they always taught us how it was painful and, how you have, the crucifixion and the whole thing, whereas from the Hindu point of view, it's all playful. Krishna as the name of the Lord. I think the most simple way of putting it is that brought up as a Catholic, until I was about 12 or 13, I went to church. I was taken to church and I was taken to communion and all that sort of thing. So I was young and maybe I misinterpreted it, but what I felt was pain, fear, and, that type of thing, as opposed to the thing I've found from the Indian point of view, which was, it's playful, it's to enjoy, it's to try and enjoy the moments. But that is not to say that you have disregard for, the past or the future, but to actually be conscious of being there now. And the play, it's like Shakespeare said, the world is a stage, the people are the players. And to realize that is like, it's not, to feel that the whole of your life is actually just a play could make people commit suicide, make you feel there's no end, no aim. But actually to see from a positive point of view is then to be pleased to be playing the part that you're playing, because that's all we're doing. I'm playing the part of ex-Beatle George, you're playing the part of, you know, Dave interviewing me, and they're all playing the, you know what I mean? But to enjoy it as opposed to see it as a, you know, dead end. And that's what the Hinduism is like, because Krishna the whole thing is a play. You know, he acts out his incarnation in order to show people how to play.
But we do exercise free choice, and you have chosen to do with your life what you're doing with your life, to express yourself through your music and to try to tell other people.
To a degree, but I don't really choose. You know, I mean, this is a funny thing. It's like to say, in some respects, my life to be me is, I'm not sure if it was a blessing or a curse, you see, because the blessing is that you're rich and famous and all this looks rosy, but on the other hand, behind the scenes, to know that what then you expect of yourself by knowing what you know through being what you've been. That's the thing of learning and knowledge, and then of what others expect of you, and then all the million situations you get involved with by being that person. You know, this goes for like anybody who goes through a similar sort of situation. Then in some respects it's a pain in the neck. You know,
is it sometimes quite lonely?
Sure, sometimes it is. You know, sometimes it's just hard. You just like to be anonymous. You know, sometimes I just like to be invisible. Even now, after 10 or whatever, 12 years of that, I still find it. I can't even go out. If I want to go out and watch somebody singing at the Roxy or something, I go in there and it's like the club tilts, you know, over, and you know, I become part of the show, and that's amazing after all that time. You know, sometimes it's nice to be invisible and just go out and just be nobody.
And I guess the realization then you can't, even if you decided to, ever walk away from it. That's it, and it's going to always be that.
So that is the point where it's not exactly your choice. In a way, it was, you know, there's a lot of things that I think most people get into things in their lives either by what they think is their choice or by just happening to fall into a situation. But I think even if you think you choose a certain role, that there's a lot of other things which, you know, subtle things which get you involved into that. And in some ways, I don't see any way for me, you know, just to get out of that situation. You know, it's not like the choice of being able to be this or be something else. You know, it's not that simple, because then you have a lot of other involvements, and again, karma is action-reaction. There's a lot of other situations which are all hanging upon, you know, I mean, this is resting upon that, which is resting upon something else, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like we build a house, and you put the first bricks down, and then you build it up to the second floor and decide you want to take the bottom bricks away. You know, you can't, you have to, like, consider the overall situation.
A friend of mine once said to me that of all of the creative forms, of all of the ways that people express themselves, music is something very special and very different, because it's the only art form which does not exist in space, but it exists in time. Said that dance or acting or painting or sculpture, you need a physical place, you need a thing, you have to watch it or look at it or read it. But music is the only thing that exists only in time. You need nothing but being able to hear, and you hear music, and it's just there.
Yeah. In a way, I think film is the same. I think, you know, I've always, for the last few years anyway, felt film and music can really enhance each other to get a point over, because again, film can exist the same way. Like music can exist as long as you've got ears and a machine and a record or a tape to play it. You can play it in an airplane, or, you know, in the basement, or, you know, in the country, you can play it this week, next week. It's the same with film too. If you have a monitoring machine and a video tape, it's like that. In a way, that can be developed. But I know music, I think, what I feel is that our physical bodies, and it all relates again to what I was saying, that we get born into a body in order to, the goal is actually to get full knowledge. So we gain our knowledge through our experiences. In order to have experience, we take a body which has the senses. So we have smell and taste and touch and sight and hearing. So then, if you take all the senses in a body, maybe different people have developed the senses, different senses better. Maybe somebody's got a finer sense of touch than somebody else. But I think, generally speaking, apart from people who are deaf, sound is, sound is so important. You don't realize, just walk down the street, it's like the sound of a tire screeching can make you even unconsciously stop yourself stepping in the road. It's like that. This is why I feel like when you get down to somebody like Stevie Wonder, his sense of hearing is so fine, it's so sensational. Maybe because he doesn't have the distraction of sight. So in some respects, I think sound is so subtle, and so much can happen in sound. And again, it's personal. You can make a song, put a record out, and take 1 million people and let them all hear that song, but they'll all hear it in their own way, because once you put it there, they are free to interpret it through their own ears, which swings, it hangs a lot on what they've been through to get to that position in space where they can sit and listen to that. That's the great thing about music, is that people, it becomes personal. Even though it's a mass media, you can make a record and put it out for whoever wants it. Once the people who do want to get it, it becomes so personal to them.
But the musician has to deal with a very real, cold, and calculating business. The music business, where records aren't called records, but they're called product, where they're merchandised and packaged and marketed like soap and underarm deodorants. And how do you think this can change at all? Do you think that there's any way that a musician can operate more freely? I mean, now you're not only a musician, you're also a music executive. You have your own record company, Dark Horse Records, which we'll be talking about in a bit. But what do you think the musician's role in the world is? How do you think he can best be catered to and nurtured and made to grow, taking into consideration what the business is?
It's very complicated, because there's the musicians who don't have that problem that, say, I may have, which is by being in the record industry, as an executive. There's like musicians, if I get musicians to play on a song with me, they're just interested in trying to do their best for the song, trying to get, play it right and all this. Whereas I'm up there, and just recently, over the last year or so, I've become so aware of program planners, and it's terrible. I tell you, it's awful when, as a musician, you're trying to make a record, and you're trying to make it, a song, I would never stop making a song as long as it feels it should be. But at the back of my mind, I'm always thinking of some guy's going to be saying, well, if you can edit it down to 3 minutes, because the program, they won't put it on the radio. So now I find, as I record a tune, and as I go and listen to it back, as I was still working on it, I'm automatically pressing the timer to see if it's 3 minutes 30, because if it isn't, there's not much chance they're going to play it on the radio.
Well, we're talking basically, you're talking about singles and top 40 radio.
Okay, talking about that one. But there's a point where you know, and especially when it's on the coldest level of the record business is when they say, well, we think the tune's pretty good, but, you know, if we're going to edit it down, then people start chopping. It's like, you know, butchers. They just take out the chopping block and they just chop out a piece to make it short enough, you know, with no consideration for, you see, sometimes, because also I'm not only in the record, you know, executive thing and a musician, but I'm a songwriter too. So as a songwriter, I think of music as, you know, whether it has an intro. Some tunes you can come right in, and some tunes need an intro to establish a certain mood before you start singing. And that leads to this piece into the second verse or whatever. You have a middle bit if you have a middle bit. But, you know, the song, I like tunes that resolve, that like go somewhere and resolve. So in all of that, as a songwriter, sometimes you locked in to a certain length of time just by trying to get the story over. It's like saying, trying to tell a story that really needs to be told in 10 minutes, but okay, just tell it in 2. You know, well, you may be able to, but you may have to sacrifice a lot of the minor details which contributed to how nice the story actually was in the end.
I always likened the editing of an album track that might be 7 minutes to a single, which might be 3 minutes and 10 seconds, to like taking a Picasso and saying, well, look, we've got to get it in an 8x10 frame. So we'll just take the painting and we'll just slice it down like that and put it...
nose off, let's make, you know, that's much better.
George told us how Dark Horse Records evolved for him from his association with Apple Records.
We just wanted out of that group therapy that was called Apple. I mean, we just wanted to be free as individuals, but at that time I was still involved making records for Apple.
Jackie Lomax.
Well, I did that a long time before, but I was involved. I just started making this album of Ravi's, Shankar Family and Friends, the ballet. And I was just really into that and enjoying that. It was so nice that I was thinking an Apple is sort of, nobody wants to do anything, you know. I mean, I don't blame John and Paul, really didn't want to know about that. They just wanted, you know, let's just chop it up into 4 pieces and let's get out of here. But at the same time, I was involved, I was committed to certain things. And a little bit later, that band Splinter. So I found that I was still going along the same lines as I had been with Apple. That is, doing my own records and then doing a few other people. So I had the decision to make, because Apple didn't have much future left based upon the way John and Paul, you know, what they'd indicated. And there was some talk with Ringo and I, you know, what we were planning to do at that time as John and Paul didn't really want to know about Apple, we were just going to try and get the rights to take over Apple Records. And then we just put a new logo under new management, bring in a couple of new people, and keep going. And so that sort of thing couldn't happen because of the settlement. Beatles, you know, it was all business legality, is that it was just like a hold on it. It was just sort of stuck in a limbo.
So you couldn't put Ravi's album and Splinter's album on Apple?
No, because they, in fact, if you go back now to, there hasn't been one other artist other than the individual Beatles put out on Apple since that split with Klein. In fact, Apple folded up, actually. Apple as a record label, other than the Beatles individually appearing on the Apple logo, and also that we'd establish Apple label much quicker if we put the Beatles on Apple too. So we did the deal with EMI for that. So we went on Apple, and Apple went on EMI, in actual fact. So since then we're still on Apple EMI up until I think it's next January. It's January of '76.
And then you will perhaps record for your own label.
Yeah, there's a good chance that I would do that, because it's only like, you know, even with Apple, there's no point in us forming a label called Apple and then we all go on RCA. You know, it's like, it seems logical. It seems a logical thing, but although at this point in time, you know, I'm still, in fact, this new album I'm making now will still be on Apple label, distributed by Capitol.
And Ringo now has a label, Ringo Records. But Ringo will have to also record for Apple at least until next January, if I understand you right.
Yeah, although there's another point, is that the contract that we had with EMI originally, that Brian Epstein made before he died, it had, I think they call it a product requirement clause. That says that you have to give them a certain amount of product. But we actually fulfilled that clause after the Beatle White album, which was like 67. You remember the double White album?
Who could forget it?
Well, that album, from then on, we didn't really owe them anything. But obviously, we're not going to stay out of the record. What we found out, we thought it was like we had to give them so many tunes, or it was a 7-year contract, I think. So we thought once we'd given them the tunes, we were out. And what happened was that we found out we gave them the tunes by 67, but it just meant we didn't have to give them anything else. But if we did anything else, then, you know, it was automatically with EMI. So, therefore, it means that for the last 5 years, none of us had to ever make a record ever again. We didn't owe to our contract, you know, to do any more records. But if we do anything else, it still goes on that label until 76 January. So Ringo wouldn't have to do another record. I don't have to do, you know, nobody has to. But it's just that that's what we do.
You make records. Let's talk about what your plans are for Dark Horse Records. So far, 2 albums have been released. The beautiful Shankar Family and Friends album, and Splinter, which is another very beautiful album. I think so far you're 2 for 2, at least in the quality of very fine records, in my opinion. Tell me who Splinter are, or what Splinter is, whatever is grammatically correct, where they come from and what you have planned for them.
Yeah, they were 2 guys from the same part of England as the Animals came from, you know, Eric Burden, that place round Newcastle, which is right up north-east of England, near Scotland. They're called Geordies. And they came from there. They were in a band. They were both in a band which broke up, and that's why they called themselves Splinter. There's just 2 guys. And I met them through this movie, Little Malcolm. Somehow I got involved with a movie. There's this actor called John Hurt. It was A Man for All Seasons and 10 Runnington Place. He's quite a well-known actor. He was a friend of mine who I'd seen play the part of Little Malcolm in a stage play called Little Malcolm and His Struggle Against the Eunuchs. So I'd known him for years, and I was always trying to talk him into doing this as a film. And incidentally, they tried to make this into a movie 2 or 3 times before. Anyway, I got through Apple, I started, and we produced this movie. We made the movie, which was about 73. Late 73, they started the movie. And there was one sequence in the film where he enters an all-night club, and they just wanted 2 tunes in there by 2 different acts, which was in a sort of, you know, the way they do in the film, they dissolve it to create the scene from night into morning. And so these 2 guys, Splinter, got the part to play in the film, and the song they sang in the film I thought was so nice that I thought I'd try and make it as a single. Then I heard the rest of their tunes, I liked them so much that I decided to produce an album, because if you did a single, it's hardly worth just doing a single, you know? So I did the album, and that became Splinter. At that time, Apple had folded up and all this, and I had the decision to either just lease the stuff I produced to a label, or to have my own logo, Really, that's the main difference, is just that, is just a logo to have your own identification. I don't know. For whatever reason, I don't know now, but I decided to have the logo. And so Splinter is just about to make their second album. In fact, they should have been here in the States to do that last week, but they couldn't get here with work visas. Well, that's why I'm using the studio time to make a new album of my own. We've just signed a new band called Jiva, who are from San Bernardino. And
what kind of a band is Jiva? What kind of a sound?
They're just two guitars, bass and drums. Three of them, the two guitar players and the bass player, all write their own tunes. They sing separately and together, but they're very up. They're like a little R&B rock band. Very nice, very positive. That's the great thing about them, is they're positive, I mean, at this time in world history, when there's so much sort of negative and confusion and stuff, they know where they're going. And full of love and up, positive, loving awareness. And they're pretty funky too for, the young, and it's like, I think this will be the first album they're making with a producer called Stuart Levine, who has just done the Minnie Riperton second album, and he's the producer of the Crusaders. That's quite interesting. In fact, they just start tonight to record.
So, Mr. How do you feel about the way things are going in the world and all of the chaos and what is happening? Do you think much about I know it is all Maya and all illusion, but it's still very real to all of us. And
very real, very real. I feel, I don't know, I think in some ways I have to split it into positive and negative. If you get negative about it, it's in a hell of a state. The world is in a mess, really. And it seems to have gotten more of a mess the last 4 or 5 years, with all this, the wars are going on just as usual. There's still as many wars as usual. There's the whole thing that happened with the fuel crisis, the energy crisis. And then also we passed out of that 60s period where there was something happened in the 60s which brought the flower power and the hippies and the whole love generation. This is what kills me now, is when I see these people who were supposedly a few years ago, who supposedly loved me and who I'm supposed to love them, and I see them, they're just dropping apart at the seams with hate. I'm talking about Rolling Stone, actually, talking about Jan Wenner. But, this is the thing that we, God, we all came through so much in the 60s, and we all wanted so much to create something positive, something good. And it's hard to, when we come out into the 70s, we find it's hard to go on. A lot of these people were only part-time hippies or part-time lovers. They, the badness of the world or in them caught up on them too soon. And you find that they just turn around and all start stabbing each other in the back. It's like we all need to support each other in many ways in order to exist. But like, for example, just the other day I heard that the guy from Badfinger, Badfinger, who was on Apple Records, day after day, the guy who wrote the big Harry Nilsson tune, Without You, he hanged himself. Okay, so he's hanged himself because he can't go on, can't go on. So that's not made easier by people who were supposedly your brothers and the people.
Why do you think so many people take such delight in taking a man who had achieved some kind of fame or notoriety or acceptance in the world? And this is not only true with you, but I'm talking about the so-called critics and people who write about people who are doing things. Why do people take such delight in taking people and dissecting them so viciously? Well, what do you suppose that phenomena is?
Frustration. I think it's frustration is a reason why. I don't know, maybe a lot has to do with the stars, the planets, I mean, like those stars. I don't know, because sometimes, I've seen that type of thing happen in the past. Well, it happened to me before as, a part of the Beatles. We went through a thing of, going up and up and up. And part of the up is by people, that people contribute to your success by writing things about you, by getting behind you, And a lot of the time, it's, because they want to just go out and do that on their own. Like initially you try and promote yourselves and the record company and press agents and that sort of thing, but say in the Beatles' case, once it starts rolling along, people just get behind it and write good things, and then it gets up to a point where so much has been said, then they decide to take it from a different point of view and decide to write about your faults.
Kind of somebody getting their own ego off by saying, well, I'll be the one to knock it. Everybody is saying such wonderful things.
Yeah, that type of thing happened with Beatles, and particularly when we went through Apple and all that situation, and then everybody came down on us and all kinds of things happened, We all got busted and stuff, and we went through bad press, and then you get good press, and you get bad press, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And it's just, I don't know, the thing I see happen to all kinds of people, the thing that bothers me is if it comes from different directions, it's okay, but when it seems to come from one basic source, then it bothers me, because it seems to get more of a personal thing than just an actual point of view,
By one source, do you mean kind of the rock press?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because, I've seen them do things to people like, for an example,
Bob.
Yeah, they tried to, kill Bob a few times. Also, the whole thing that split the Cream, actually, the band The Cream, was, something that they said in Rolling Stone, just, sort of depressed Eric, I know, to such a point where he just thought, just get out of this.
Fortunately, it doesn't seem to have an effect on people. All the bad press in the world does not really destroy an artist of great stature and great talent. It hasn't destroyed anybody, not Dylan and not Eric and not you or not anyone.
Because, you either have to agree completely with them and commit suicide, or, take them with a pinch of hate. So, really just because I could read criticisms of myself, and if I'm in a decent mood, I'll think, well, that's unfair, and that is, maybe that's fair, but if you get depressed, you start agreeing with them. If you start agreeing with them, then you just go and do yourself in. But wouldn't do that, just for something else, because enough things happen to prove that it's not exactly how they see it, one situation with the rock press, for example, was the one guy who came to write an article because he disagreed with another article that had been written in his paper. And so he said, I've seen, 7 of these concerts and I disagree and I want to write it from my point of view. Then his article came out and it was not really good at all. And I thought, well, he's just, he was just cheating me, just to get in to talk to me. But then he just wrote a letter to me and sent what he wrote. And to compare that to what they printed, he just said, they just cut it out. They just cut out any favorable references to the music or to the response from the audience. It just made me feel, forget it, it's just, they just trying to nail me now, and that's it. That's all it is. In fact, I think that's one reason I went on that tour with all those people, to do something which was, not done every week. The whole idea of having such a whole different bunch of people, different attitudes, and different types of music, and just a broader type of show, was because it's boring just going on and on and on, pretending that we're all happy.
Can't boogie every night.
Yeah, but people think, we go down Madison Square, wherever we go down, and who's on this week? This week it's him, next week it's somebody else, and there's a million different record companies and artists and bands. And, a lot of the time the music's fine, a lot of the time, how many of the people, the audience, who's like your audience now, or the audience of Madison Square Garden, who are the same people, and you come back, and how many times did you really enjoy that show, or you were just there because you were with a chick who wanted to see it, or you're a chick who was with a guy who wanted to see it, or you just went because it was something to do, or I don't know, but it gets pretty tedious, I don't like to just become part of something which is like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, something which just is repetitious, and and suddenly we find we're all old and we're all dying, and what did we do? We just got caught in a rut.
Don't you think what happened in those late 60s, that great feeling of optimism, did in one way light the world and change consciousness and raise awareness in a subtle way that the world will never be the same again?
Definitely. And that's the thing. Maybe the thing that disappointed me was there might have been 1 million people who showed signs of being that, and now in the 70s, out of the 1 million, there may only be 100 left. The thing that's sad is what happened to the other, 990,000.
Is there anybody in particular that you, in music or out of music, whatever, men or women, that you really admire greatly as people, as human beings, and what they're doing in the world?
Yeah. In music, well then it breaks down into, there's people who have a sort of more of a worldly consciousness, and that's why I've always been with Ravi Shankar, because he's bringing, particularly in the West, he's bringing something obscure and creating an audience, and through his audience then he's giving them something extra, which, that's something which the people who appreciate that can get into. It's a whole other train of thought that comes from the music. In simpler terms, there's people are like people who just convey in their music some sort of sincerity. Like I'm a big fan of Smokey Robinson, just because musically he's so sweet. He's so sweet, he makes you feel nice, he makes me feel good, whereas there's a lot of music I listen to, which is popular music, which just makes me uptight, even if I'm not really listening too close to it. It's just the sound of it and the whole thing, and the repetition, the boring sort of repetition of how it's played. I always have been a fan of Dylan's, and I think I always will be, because, I don't know, somehow Dylan has always managed to upstage everybody. When it comes down to being aware of, and also of being able to put into words, we can feel and see a lot of things, but when it comes down to writing a tune and being able to communicate it through words, he's very good at being able to put words down.
I think you're one of the few people, one of maybe 3 people who have ever collaborated with him on a song. Just you, and I think Rick Danko did, and I think Jamie Robertson did, but that's about all.
Yeah, and then what he wrote is so simple. All I have is yours, all you see is mine, and I'm glad to hold you in my arms. I'd have you anytime. I find now, like, the 70s seems to, there's a lot of people who are just forced into being so much more individual, and that's where I'd put me. And people like, you know, Eric Clapton, if you hear his new album, I think it's so sweet. And he's one of the people who can play every guitar lick that all them people who are still playing what he was playing when he was in the Cream, they're still doing it now. You know what I mean? But he, in a way, is more out on a limb too with his music. But for my money, it's better than he's ever been. It's sweeter, warmer, but it's more personal to him now. And maybe that's why I like it better, because it's, you know, it's just richer because he's showing more of, you know, how he feels. But there's a lot of us from the 60s who were, you know, came up in the 60s, and then I put John Lennon there as well, you know, like Walls and Bridges, that album in particular, where we were the people who sort of came up through, we battled our way up through the 60s and became something. And then in the 70s, there's a whole, you know, multitude of other people who were just battling their way through and being really successful and all that. But that situation has forced all of us into more, going inside ourselves more. You know, it's like, say, with this new album of mine, all I want is to be able to sing the tunes I have and to do them as warm and as simple as possible. You know, that's really, and I think by that, in itself, it puts you into that position of, you know, I don't see my music anymore as being top 20, somehow. I just played you one track before.
Does that matter to you anymore?
No, it matters more to me that I can simply sing it better, play it better, and with less orchestration get over more feeling. Because it again gets down to, say, that out of the 1 million people, if there's only 100 left out of the 1 million who were supposedly potential love generation, if there's only 100 left, it's again, if there's 100 people,
you'll make your music for them.
If the 10 people out of the 100 prefer it as it is now, then it makes me valid. Otherwise, you know, it's down to suicide.
Do you think the time might come when you'll get tired or bored with writing songs and making records?
Well, not really. Not really. It's like I don't always do it. You know, I write tunes. Like I never wrote a tune actually for about 6 months, up until last Saturday. I sat down, decided I better get some tunes together, and I just got into the mood of it and wrote or finished 9 tunes and wrote a couple of new tunes. So I don't always do it, but it is nice because, like you were saying earlier, music somehow is a way, you know, I can talk to you for hours, but if I just sang you one tune, it'll somehow get to you easier, quicker.
You did that before when you played me last time.
So, you know, that's, in some respects, it's better to be able to communicate without so many words. You can say just a few simple words and put it in such a way that it gets over such a better point than talking for days.
Well, in closing, there will be not 10 people and not 100 people who will hear this, but many thousands of people who have a genuine and a real affection for you, listening. And maybe there's something you would like to say to them.
Yeah, good. Thank you. God bless anybody who's, you know, give us a smile, and anytime we'd rather have a smile than a knife in the back.